Minister of Niger, one of the reasons why General Tiani was able to stand his ground and resist Western sanctions was because China supported Niger. China, with its non-interference policy, made it a preferred choice of partner for Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Unlike the West, which loves to interfere and play the hero in the affairs of Africa, China prefers a mutually beneficial relationship without any form of interference in the affairs of the host countries. It is this attribute that has pushed African countries farther away from their traditional partners, the West, and closer to China and Russia. In April 2024, Niger State Television announced that the military junta of Niger signed a $400 million deal with a Chinese state-owned oil giant as part of its plan to diversify international partnerships after cutting ties with France and the United States. The agreements, signed by Niger's Prime Minister Ali Mahaman Lamine and CNPC Chairman Joe Zuokun, provide for the joint marketing of Niger's crude oil. Under these arrangements, China will make an advance payment of $400 million to Niger, which will be paid from revenues generated by the sale of crude oil on the international market. According to the information published by the government, the repayment will be spread over 12 months, with an interest rate of 7%. Speaking to the press after signing the deal, Prime Minister Zaina stated that there is no shadow over this as we have safeguarded the interests of our country. China is a great friend for Niger. We can never say it enough, he added. The Prime Minister further added that it must be remembered since the beginning of this great oil adventure, China has always been at the side of our country, and today it is proven that at such crucial moments, we could obviously manage to request in advance. These are Niger's rights, and we will give ourselves all the means to repay them. According to Prime Minister Zaina, the funds will be managed transparently and will be used primarily for the defense and security of the country, which faces persistent challenges linked to the violent activities of jihadist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. In addition to security and defense, the funds will also be used to settle debt payments and investments in agricultural development and improve medical services. Since the coup occurred in July 2023, Niger has missed around $600 million in debt payments. Hence, the funds are needed to settle some part of that debt. This is proof that Niger and China have had a budding relationship. So why did the military junta of Niger decide to send the Chinese officials packing? Well, according to two sources familiar with the matter, General Tiani ordered 3 Chinese officials working in the oil sector to leave the country in order to assert greater control over its resources. This demand was made on Wednesday last week, and the Chinese companies involved include the China National Petroleum Corporation, CNPC, the West African Oil Pipeline Company, BUAPCO, and the joint venture oil refinery Suraz. The Chinese officials were given 48 hours to leave, and one source close to the government said that by Friday they were already out of the country. Another source revealed that these directors were asked to leave because of disputes over pay for local staff and the pace of work on projects. According to Ibrahim Hamidou, head of communications for Prime Minister Ali Lamine Zaina, the companies had failed to adhere to a 2024 amendment to the mining code promoting the use of local goods, services, and labor in Niger's extractive sector. We simply asked the companies to pick a Nigerian subcontractor when possible, and that a majority of the subcontractors shouldn't be Chinese, Hamidou said. In simple terms, Niger sent these directors out because they refused to make use of local resources in the oil sector, a dictate that was part of an agreement signed between Niger and the Chinese companies in March 2024. You see, in March 2024, General Tiani decided to take a bold step to protect the interests of Niger in terms of its resources. Since it arrived in Niger in 2008, the China National Petroleum Corporation has been in control of Niger's oil sector. Through its company PetroChina, China struck a deal with the Nigerian government to develop the Agadem oil field, which has an estimated reserves of 650 million barrels. As part of the deal, PetroChina invested in the construction of the Suraz refinery, located 460 kilometers away in the southern city of Zinder, and eventually led to Niger becoming an oil producer in 2011. According to the agreement, China holds a 60% stake in the refinery, which has a capacity of 20,000 barrels per day and mostly supplies the domestic market, while the government owns the remaining share. In 2019, China took a step further to construct the 2,000 kilometers oil pipeline between the Agadem field and the Beninese port city of Cotonou to expand oil production in Niger. Currently, The construction of the project is complete, and Niger is set to produce 110,000 barrels of oil per day. No doubt, China invested these millions of dollars in Niger's oil industry to have a share in future revenue gotten from the sale of oil, which is not a bad thing. After all, the agreement is supposed to be mutually beneficial to both Niger and China. However, it does not change the fact that China has more control of Niger's oil than Niger itself, and the military government of Niger is not happy with this. So, on the 3rd of March, 2024, the military government of Niger signed 2 decrees that will ensure that 2 of Niger's major oil blocks are under the control of the government. The 2 oil blocks, areas where oil is found and extracted, are the Bilma oil block and the Agadem oil block, both of which were under the control of China's oil firm. Recall that the Agadem oil block was developed by PetroChina, and the company has a 60% stake in the field. However, the new decree grants Sonidep, Niger's state-owned oil company, substantial access and control over the Bilma oil block and the Agadem oil block. What this means is that, unlike before, Niger will now be fully involved in the production of oil and the development of the oil sector. So why did the military junta of Niger decide to take this decision? According to the director of Sonidep, Colonel Ali Seibu, the military junta of Niger, General Tiani does not have any issues with China, its current partners, and will ask for their services when and where needed. However, he said that Niger has its own local engineers and professionals that specialize in the extraction of oil, refinery, and development of petroleum products, and the government plans to utilize their services. Therefore, Niger will only seek the services of foreign partners when and where it is necessary. The director also added that regarding the expertise needed, it can be bought or rented, and it is up to the authorities in Niger to look for technical and financial partners to support the country. He added that the country is in another dynamic and level where it is Niger first before anyone else. In his own words, "It is not good for a country to take itself hostage. I have nothing against these partners. They are very good and have helped us to produce, and perhaps we will continue to work with them on other aspects. And if there are any aspects we need their help, we will ask for it." This was the agreement made between Niger and the Chinese oil companies. But after a recent probe into the sector, the military leader of Niger realized that the directors of these companies have refused to adhere to the agreement. Instead of using local Niger engineers and other professionals in the oil sector, these directors continue to use Chinese professionals. This is the reason why General Tiani decided to send them out. Obviously, this is an attempt to pressure them to adhere to the agreement. What a remarkable leader who is looking out for the interest of his people. How many African leaders can do this? Most African leaders would most likely not be bothered as long as they have a share in the oil companies. In African countries where foreign countries establish themselves to exploit resources, these companies use more of their professional people to do the job. Meanwhile, there are people in their countries who went to school to learn the same thing and have no jobs. And even if the citizens do not have the technical know-how, what exactly is stopping the government from employing foreigners who have this knowledge to teach their citizens so that they no longer have to depend on foreigners' technical skills? Well, it's great news that the military junta of Niger is seeing this from this perspective and has taken the necessary step. It's time for African countries to stop depending on the West or any country at all for technical skills. Africa is blessed not just with mineral resources, but also with human resources. Africa is blessed with people who are smart, intelligent, and innovative, and it is high time that African governments start to take advantage of what it has. Instead of depending on foreign aid and foreign help, African governments should focus on supporting local innovation and technology. This is one major way that African countries can develop. The continent needs to start producing valuable products with its abundant resources which it can sell in the international market. This is how the countries in the world grew to become what they are today. It's time to move on from just protecting African minerals to investing in innovation and technology with those minerals. This is similar to what is currently happening in Mali. Recall that in October, Mali signed a deal with Russia to build a nuclear power plant in order to solve its energy crisis. According to recent news, construction will begin in the next 2 years. The interesting aspect is that the Malian military government included in the deal that Russian experts in nuclear power plant construction would begin teaching Mali's local engineers the necessary technical know-how. According to reports, these Russian instructors are now in the country, teaching Mali's engineers the technical skills needed to construct a power plant. Just think about it. By the time Russia fulfills its end of the deal, if Mali decides to create multiple nuclear power plants, it can do so without calling in foreigners to do the job. Now here's an important question. How will China take this news? Well, let's go back in time. At the time, General Tiani made the deal in March 2024. China took the news calmly, which is quite a change from what would have been expected if it were the West in its position. On April 8, 2024, China sent delegations to Niger, where they met with the junta, General Tiani, to clarify what the decree meant. Led by the Chinese ambassador to Niger, Zhang Feng, China expressed its commitment and desire to continue the partnership with Niger in its oil sector. After discussions with the junta, Zhang stated during the press briefing that China is satisfied with the rational friendship and fruitful cooperation between both countries. He revealed that Niger's military junta attached absolute importance to political and economic sovereignty, hence the reason for the decision. He also went on to reiterate China's contribution to the oil sector in Niger through the construction of the oil refinery and the 200 kilometers oil pipeline. Then he ended by saying that China remains committed to working with Niger to develop its oil sector. This is quite an interesting reaction from China. It was later reported that the meeting with Niger ended with Niger agreeing to allow China to be the exporter of its oil in the international market. The reason why it went like this is because China, unlike the West, has a non-interference foreign policy and believes in mutually beneficial cooperation. Imagine if it was the United States or France that was in China's place. There is no doubt that they would not agree to the decision made by the junta, and they would do all they could to ensure that the oil blocks remain in their control. This is the reason why China is gradually becoming the preferred partner of most African countries. Its commitment to nurturing partnerships based on mutual benefit and respect for sovereignty is a breath of fresh air, in contrast to the one-sided beneficial agreements of the West. So from this, we can speculate that China might heed the demand of General Tiani. We propose this due to the fact that the Chinese directors did not even waste any time to leave the country. In the next few weeks, we should expect delegations from China to discuss the way forward. But the decision of the military junta should be applauded. It goes to show how he and the other leaders are always on the lookout to protect their resources. Interestingly, on March 6th, Niger revoked the operating license of the Chinese-owned Solux International Hotel in the capital, Niamey, over alleged discriminatory practices and administrative violations. Indeed, whether it's the West or China or even Russia, the military leaders will always protect their sovereignty above relations with foreign countries. However, it's not just the oil sector that Niger has asserted economic sovereignty. In November 2024, the military junta of Niger kicked out Orano, French uranium company that has taken control of the country's uranium since independence. Uranium was first discovered in 1957 at Azelik in Niger by French Geological Society, looking for copper. However, they struck gold, and not surprisingly, 8 years after independence, France entered into a series of agreements with the leaders of Niger at the time, which enabled it to have unrestricted access to the mineral. In return for this access, the leaders in Niger were guaranteed military security and protection from the threat of terrorism and internal threats such as local political opposition. France also added developmental aid as part of the agreement, one which those greedy leaders eagerly signed. The rest is history, as France established its mining company named Areva at the time to begin the exploitation of the mining site. From that point onward, Niger became an important trade partner for France, exporting uranium to the country for electricity generation. This has been the norm, with each successive government in Niger granting France privileged access to the country's uranium at a very low cost in exchange for security and financial aid. As a result, Areva became the sole producer of uranium in Niger, controlling a large percentage of the mining sites. This is one of the reasons why, after the coup in Niger and the subsequent protests against French presence, French President Emmanuel Macron released an unusually strong statement saying that any attack against France and its interests will not be tolerated. In simple terms, the French president meant that if Niger attacked French interests in the country, France would be forced to retaliate. But the question is, what exactly are France's interests in Niger? Well, they are military and economic, but most importantly, economic. Recall that after France was forced to withdraw from Mali following a breakdown in relations between Paris and the military junta, it turned to Niger. The deposed president, Mohamed Bazoum, welcomed about 1,500 French troops into Niger to continue the fight against the jihadist insurgency in the Sahel region. Now, like the US, the presence of French military troops in Niger was not to combat terrorism, but to project military dominance. However, as it did with the United States, the military leader of Niger has destroyed that dominance by kicking both the US and French military out of the country. But beyond the military, the most important French interest in Niger is largely economic. Niger is the world's 7th biggest producer of uranium, possesses Africa's highest grade uranium ores, and is one of the main exporters of uranium to Europe. Not surprisingly, France, its former colonial master, is a major importer of Nigerian uranium, which helps power the massive French civil nuclear industry. When the coup in Niger occurred, the head of Macron's Renaissance Party, Sylvain Maillard, spoke on France Info Radio, saying that France is following the situation in Niger very closely, not only in case it endangers the population, but also for its impact on France's economic interests. As you well know, uranium is part of the equation, so we're watching what is happening very attentively, he said. This goes to show you just how much France is interested in Niger's uranium. However, just like the other members of the AES Confederation, the military leader of Niger, General Tiani, has decided to take charge of the country's resources. You see, when he came to power, the general vowed to review foreign mining concessions in the country, and since then, he has made several moves in this direction. First, he suspended the issuance of new mining licenses in January this year and ordered an audit of the sector. And now he has just revoked the operating license that allowed French nuclear fuel producer Orano, formerly Areva, to operate one of the world's largest uranium mines. According to Al Jazeera, Orano announced that it had been denied access to mine from the Imouralen mine in northern Niger, which is estimated to contain 200,000 tons of uranium. Niger's Ministry of Mines reportedly threatened Orano with revocation of its license if development work did not begin by June 19th. A week before the deadline, Orano announced that it had resumed operations at the site. Due to current market conditions with uranium prices rising steadily, we may reconsider the commissioning of Imouralen, the company stated. However, on June 20th, Niger authorities sent a letter to Orano indicating that the company's wind-down plans did not meet our expectations. As a result, the mine was returned to public ownership and stripped of all contractual rights. This was a significant setback for France, and as you can imagine, the company did not take this decision lightly. But the fact is that there is nothing they can do about it. Niger owns the uranium resources, and for the military junta, it is a huge crime that the country has not benefited from its resources. The military junta of Niger is a leader that every African leader should follow in his footsteps. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and share this video.